You may have heard the term supervolcano before. It's often used to describe volcanoes that are so large they can destroy entire countries or even continents with a single catastrophic eruption. And there are 12 of them scattered across the globe. But could one of these supervolcanoes be the thing that triggers the next dark age for humanity? Let's dive into this topic in today's episode. Welcome to my channel. Today we're answering the question, could a supervolcano trigger the next dark age? Now, if you know anything about dark ages, then you probably know that it refers to a time period in European history following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, marked by a decline in literacy, population, trade, and technology. The term itself is somewhat controversial because many scholars debate its accuracy and implications. But whether you call it the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, or the early modern period, the fact remains that it was a pretty rough time to be alive. As the West Roman Empire collapsed, much of Europe fell into chaos and disarray. Invasions from Germanic tribes led to mass displacement and death. Cities were abandoned. Trade routes were cut off. People no longer had access to basic goods and services, and all knowledge wasn't being passed down like it had been during the Roman Empire. Literacy rates declined dramatically, and most people could not read or write. This lack of education and widespread poverty also led to an increase in superstition, and religion became more important than science and reason. As a result, many people believed that the world was flat, that diseases were caused by evil spirits, and that the sun revolved around the earth, rather than the other way around. Many great works of art and literature were lost, and progress in science and technology stalled. The Renaissance would not begin for several centuries, and it was only through the discovery of new lands and resources that Europe would eventually emerge from the Dark Ages. So how could a supervolcano lead to such a devastating collapse? Well, let's take a look at what might happen when one of these supervolcanoes erupts. First, we need to understand just how big these supervolcanoes really are. The largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history occurred in 1815, when Mount Tambora on the island of Sumba in Indonesia erupted. The massive explosion unleashed 40 cubic miles of ash and rock, killing over 88,000 people. It was so powerful that it plunged the northern hemisphere into darkness for months and triggered a worldwide famine that killed hundreds of thousands more. But even though Tambora is considered one of the deadliest volcanoes of all time, it pales in comparison to some of the truly super volcanoes scattered across the globe. For example, there is Yellowstone National Park in the United States, which has experienced 3 super eruptions in the last 2 million years. If Yellowstone were to erupt again, it could throw over 600 cubic miles of ash and rock into the atmosphere. This would completely encircle the globe and trigger a nuclear winter that could last for years. Another supervolcano is located in Lake Kivu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It is the second largest active volcano in Africa and has the potential to hurl over 300 cubic miles of ash and rock into the air. A third supervolcano is located in Manoon in Cameroon, and if it were to erupt, it could send over 250 cubic miles of debris skyward. While the effects of any of these individual volcanoes would be disastrous, the real threat comes from the possibility that multiple supervolcanoes could erupt simultaneously. Scientists believe that this could be triggered by a massive asteroid impact or a supervolcano eruption somewhere else in the world. For example, if an asteroid were to strike Yellowstone, it could trigger a chain reaction that leads to other supervolcanoes going off as well. This could potentially cause a global catastrophe unlike anything we have ever seen before. But why would a volcano trigger a dark age specifically? Why not just kill everyone or end all life on Earth? Well, as bad as it sounds, a volcano wiping out all life on Earth would actually prevent a dark age from happening. A dark age is defined by a lack of technological advancement, a decline in literacy, infrastructure, and culture, all of which is caused by human activity or the lack thereof. So if a volcano were to wipe out all humans, there wouldn't be a dark age because there would be no one left to start one. However, a supervolcano eruption doesn't have to completely wipe out humanity to cause a dark age. In fact, it could cause a dark age without even killing that many people. Here's how. First, the eruption would cause widespread panic and chaos. People would flee their homes, abandoning their jobs and disrupting the flow of goods and services. Eventually, the ash and debris would block out the sun, leading to a global cooling effect. This would disrupt agricultural production and lead to widespread famine. Within a few years, billions of people would likely die from starvation and disease. Those who survived would be forced to abandon their cities and retreat to the countryside where they could grow their own food. In the aftermath, society would collapse and all forms of modern communication and transportation would cease to exist. Without roads or vehicles, people would be unable to travel long distances and trade would come to a standstill. Without electricity, people would be unable to communicate with each other or access vital information. Without clean water and basic medical care, people would be vulnerable to deadly diseases and parasites. Without refrigeration, food would spoil quickly and widespread famine would become commonplace. Without schools and books, knowledge would not be passed down to future generations and literacy rates would plummet. In short, a supervolcano eruption would cause such widespread destruction and chaos that it would essentially undo centuries of human progress and set us back to a time when people lived in small, isolated communities and were constantly on the brink of starvation. But could such an event really happen? Is it possible that a supervolcano eruption could trigger the next dark age? The answer, unfortunately, is yes. While it is highly unlikely to happen anytime soon, it is a real possibility that cannot be ruled out entirely. For example, scientists believe that the most likely candidate for the next super eruption is Mount Vesuvius in Italy. Vesuvius is the site of the infamous eruption that destroyed the Roman city of Pompeii in 79 AD. And while this eruption was not a true super eruption, it is possible that Vesuvius could erupt again with enough force to cause major damage and disruption. Another potential candidate is Mount Unzen in Japan, which has been in a state of eruption since 1991. While it is currently dormant, scientists believe that it could erupt again with devastating force. In the event of a super eruption, the consequences for humanity would be dire. Even if it did not result in a full-blown dark age, it would cause widespread death and destruction and set back human civilization by centuries. The good news is that scientists are constantly monitoring volcanoes around the world, and they are able to detect any changes in activity. If a super eruption were to occur, they would be able to give people enough warning to evacuate and hopefully avoid the worst-case scenario. It's important to remember that while a supervolcano eruption could definitely be disastrous, it is still a very unlikely event. We have never experienced a supervolcano eruption in recorded human history, and the chances of one happening anytime soon are extremely low. Nevertheless, it is a possibility that we cannot rule out entirely, and one that we should be prepared for just in case. The bottom line is that a supervolcano eruption could cause so much death and destruction that it could potentially trigger a dark age for humanity. While it is highly unlikely to happen anytime soon, it is still a possibility that we cannot rule out entirely, and one that we should be prepared for, just in case. That was a quick history summary. Do you think a supervolcano could cause the next dark age? Comment below. Also, big news. We are now available on audio platforms. Listen to this episode and previous episodes in your favorite podcast app. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to learn more about history. See you next time.